If you're a trucking fleet and you're looking for drivers, there's something you need to know above anything else. And knowing this can help shape how you talk with drivers, advertise your openings, and reshape your whole interaction with them. So, what am I talking about here? What is it that you need to know? Well, it's knowing what they want. So let's talk about it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Recruiting Roundup. Each month we're back here with a new edition of the show, diving into a different driver recruiting or talent acquisition topic. Now, if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as you may have guessed from my intro a moment ago, today's episode will be focusing on drivers and driver recruiting. We'll be covering and comparing survey data to get to the heart of what drivers want now and take a look at how that's changed over time. So let's get right into it. Let's get to the topic at hand and really dig in. Now, here at Randall Riley, we love data.
Then why don't you marry it?
And in keeping with that, over the years, we've conducted multiple surveys with drivers trying to drill down and find out exactly what they're looking for in a job and what matters most to them. Because knowing this information can help shape your approach to how you try to attract and retain quality drivers. But as with everything, drivers change, and a new crop of drivers come into the industry as older drivers age out. And as that has happened, some of the data and top priorities have begun to shift. What do I mean?
I'll tell you everything.
I wish you would.
Well, let's take a look at some of the survey differences. And just for reference, the data I'm talking about here today is all taken from our What Drivers Want surveys we've conducted over the years. First up, the elephant in the room, pay. Pay has always been massively important when it comes to attracting and retaining drivers. But over the years, we've started to see some interesting developments. A little over a decade ago, pay was far and away the biggest friction factor when it came to finding drivers. And the What Drivers Want surveys from 2014 to 2017, pay was the top issue for 75% of those drivers surveyed. However, that number fell to 35% in 2025. Now, that's a big difference. And I do want to hammer it home here. That doesn't mean that pay is no longer a factor. Indeed, over a third still consider pay the biggest factor. But what has changed is other areas like overall job structure, job duties, and things like home time have all become increasingly important to drivers. And as their emphasis on those areas has grown, the dominance of pay in these surveys has begun to lower. That's what the numbers look like when we talk about finding or hiring new drivers, but what about keeping drivers? What has happened with the options around pay when it comes to retention? Well, it too has seen a decline. For the surveys in the years 2014 to 2019, drivers cited pay as the top issue, saying they don't get paid enough when asked why fleets struggle to retain drivers. Now you fast forward to 2025, and again, while still very important, now only 30% of drivers say that pay is the single most important retention issue. Even more interesting is that over that same time period, 57% of drivers said that they had not received a pay increase from their carrier in at least 2 years.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all.
So what's the deal? What's going on? Well, again, none of this means that pay is not important. But it would seem that the overall compensation for drivers has remained fairly consistent, and with limited wage growth between fleets, other areas have begun to make a bigger impact in helping drivers make decisions between the fleets that are competing for them. This means things like scheduling consistency, home time, and cultural fit are all more important today than ever before. Case in point, let's take a look at respect. We all know drivers have always craved respect, and they absolutely hate feeling like they're just another number on a spreadsheet. But over the last few years, respect has climbed to essentially be even with pay as a retention issue. Of those surveyed in 2025, 30% named pay as the top retention issue, while 29% named respect. That gap shrank by nearly 8 points between 2014 and 2025. Then you got home time. There's been a big shift in preference for local routes over the past few years, with much of that having to do with job predictability and the desire to be at home more often. And it would seem that has already led to the trucking industry starting to adjust their approach. For instance, in 2016, home time was cited by 62% of drivers as a reason why fleets have a hard time finding drivers, and 64% said it was a major retention issue. Now you compare that to 2025, when only 12% say it's a big factor when it comes to the fleets finding drivers and 14% when it comes to being a retention issue. Now, I know what you're thinking. I say home time is becoming more important, but then I give you numbers that seemingly contradict that.
I don't understand.
Yeah, me neither.
Since home time has become more important to drivers, well, fleets have addressed this by changing route options wherever possible and doing everything they can to get the drivers home more often to meet those wants and needs. And by doing this, the industry as a whole has essentially reset driver expectations when it comes to home time, and thereby made it a more baseline requirement than a standout differentiator among trucking fleets. And that, my friends, is just the tip of the iceberg. The differences in driver preferences and opinions that have changed in the past decade or so, well, it's pretty interesting. And if you want to dig into the topic even more and learn more about the differences in our What Drivers Want surveys on topics like technology, benefits and retirements, overall industry expectations, and much, much more, well, hey, you can get all of that in our What Drivers Want Then versus Now download. Now, this stuff is really interesting, and it can really help you get a better understanding of where drivers today stand on a variety of topics, which, again, knowing something like that can only help you get better in your recruiting approach. I'll leave a link for that down below. And with that, we've reached the end of another edition of our show. Tune in next month when we'll cover a different driver recruiting or talent acquisition topic. Until then, thanks for watching.